So for our topic, we got prosecutorial discretion and race. Prosecutorial discretion is defined as being the power held by government prosecuting attorneys. These individuals determine many things, including whether or not charges are brought upon particular individuals, deciding whether or not to exercise mercy and leniency, and they also have a hand in plea negotiations and bail. Because these powers with discretions, prosecutors can ultimately use race as a factor when making various choices. When it comes to plea negotiations, this discretion is also characterized by racially unequal results, like during the years 1989 to 1990. A white defendant with no previous criminal record had a 33% chance of having serious changes reduced to a misdemeanor or like an infraction, but when it was compared to an African American, they only had a 25% chance of the same outcome. When it comes to bail, bail ultimately means the difference between freedom and incarceration for individuals. There was a study done in New Haven, Connecticut, and it concluded that bail rates for black defendants were higher than those for white defendants who were in similar situations. Um, Federal statistics also present similar findings, um, concluding that whites are released before trial in 66% of cases compared to Hispanics who are released only 26% of the time. Um, with the history, it can be seen as going as far back, like this problem can be seen going as far back to as far as Civil War. Um, at this time, the criminal justice system was responsible for taking the newly freed slaves and returning them to plantation owners. Um, and this was done for a monetary profit. When it came to the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, it was a very similar situation. Basically, at this time, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1892 was passed, which was responsible for outlawing opium use. But the Chinese were the only individuals affected by the law, while whites were not. Um, Also, Native Americans also saw this discretion as they have historically been forced into relocation by white citizens. And basically, in all these examples, it's just showing that the criminal justice system can be seen ultimately maintaining white privilege. More recently, in the 1980s and 1990s, the drug crack cocaine could be seen creating dividing lines between certain races. Um, Hundreds of black and Latino individuals were prosecuted for crimes including the drug crack cocaine more than white individuals, but it's just ironic because it was proven that white individuals actually used this drug more than minorities. So again, that's basically just showing white privilege in the criminal justice system back then, just like it does today. Um, Today, African Americans are nearly 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession than white Americans. Um, even though there's more police activity in African American communities, so like this could be attributed to this disparity. Um, there are more than 900,000 African Americans in prison today. Um, and on any given day, there's disparities at every step of the criminal process. So, at every step of the process of being prosecuted, African Americans and other minorities are more likely to be treated differently than their Caucasian counterparts. Um, Prosecutorial discretion creates certainty that some defendants will be treated differently than others because of their race or social class. So, and that just basically means like Americans like harbor negative attitudes towards other people who aren't the same color as them or the same social class as them. A prosecutor may and often does choose to overcharge certain defendants based on race. Um, the charging decision is like one of the most important decisions a prosecutor can make. So, if they're prosecuting based on race, then there's going to be unfair prosecutions in the criminal justice system. Um, but it starts with the racial inequality of police officers because police officers are arresting African Americans and presenting them for prosecution at disproportionately higher rates than their similarly situated white counterparts. And just like prosecutors, police officers make decisions that discriminate against African Americans and other minorities, and this can have a very negative impact on society because it's going to cause African Americans who live in majority black neighborhoods to have to live in fear because they're going to feel like if they do something that their white counterparts do, they're the ones who's going to be prosecuted for it and arrested for it. And this is going to cause the minorities to resent police officers and other officials in the criminal justice system because they're going to feel like they're not being treated fairly, which they wouldn't be in those cases. Um, and other than a constitutional challenge by the criminal defendant, there's very little process for review of these decisions, and um, it's very hard to prove in court that you was prosecuted unfairly because of your race. Um, so it's basically just impossible to prove. So most people just don't try to prove it at all. Um, but there are ways that this can be improved since prosecutors are in a unique position to use their discretion to eliminate any racial inequality in the criminal justice system. Um, they're supposed to seek justice by ensuring fairness and not simply just try to win convictions. So, if they would focus less on race and more on fairness, then that's an easy fix to this problem. But a researcher named Angela Davis came up with the idea to use racial impact studies in prosecution offices. And basically, these studies would involve the collection and publication of data on the race of the defendant and the victim. and the prosecutorial action at each stage of the criminal process. And basically this data would just be able to tell if race was a factor in like the decisions that were made at each step. And they'll be made public so the prosecutors could be held accountable for their actions. So yeah, basically prosecutors have the power and privilege to change the system, and the publication of these racial impact studies will help assure that they do.